Welcome back, everyone, to our Week 5 preview of, I guess, continuation of our Week 5 preview because we kind of started last week for Washington Commanders facing the LA Chargers in Week 5, coming off a absolutely abysmal loss to the Atlanta Falcons, which we will get into here shortly. Just full disclosure, I am sick right now, so my throat has an expiration date on it tonight. Gonna try to power through as much as possible. I got water, I got cough drops, I got the whole setup here. But we're gonna try to push through. And hopefully my voice doesn't give out on me. So until then though, we shall proceed. Ben, how are we doing tonight?
Hey, personally, I'm doing great. Life is busy and life is good, and I'm very thankful that we get to be here and talk football. Unfortunately, we're coming off of a loss, so that's never a great feeling when we're doing the Commanders show. I know all the fans are, pretty bummed about that. I am as well, but we'll get into it. But it's not a great week to be a Commanders fan necessarily, and in terms of the short 7-day window we're looking at, right?
Yeah. So we're just gonna get right into this. So the bad thing wasn't the score, really. I mean, you look at it like, okay, you lost by a touchdown. That's kind of standard in today's NFL, touchdown or less, most games. That wasn't the way it felt though. Like at really any point. Once we went down 10 to nothing, I believe, and that was first quarter, I knew I was like, yeah, we're done. We just don't have it this week. We're done. And we'll try again next week. Hopefully Jaden will be healthy and everything will be all right. you know? But turns out that Mariota wasn't the problem. He wasn't really helping that much, but he wasn't the problem. He played a fine game for a backup. But the defense, which you will hear is tonight's theme, was awful. It was quite awful. I just realized it says week 3 recap. It was actually week 4. But anyways, I digress. Um, it was just a truly awful performance by the defense in all facets. Pass defense, run defense. Bijan Robinson appeared to be playing a high school defense. Um, or he's just that good. Maybe we have an improved run defense and it's just Bijan Robinson, going crazy. But it was, we're going to get into details. I'm intentionally being vague because I don't want to be redundant later on in the show, but it was bad. I can say that. It was bad.
Yeah, and B. John Robinson is that good. Like I don't necessarily feel bad that. And listen, he's had bigger games, in terms of uh, yardage production on the ground or consistently chunking up yards per carry, right? He's had more explosive games than that. But I don't feel bad, super bad about Bijan going off as much as I do about Michael Penix going off. Michael Penix had a really bad week the week before, not a
Yep.
great one the week before that, and then he shows up against our secondary, and we'll talk more about that. But roast us for about 300 yards, so that bothered me probably more than anything. Although I did want to try to slow Robinson down too. And I don't, it wasn't like every play, every carry he was roasting us, but those explosives, man. I wish we could have taken away those explosives that Robinson built up. And then, he's also grabbing some chunk yardage too along the way.
Yeah, Michael Penix and uh Bijan both having career days.
Yeah.
Seems like everyone just like in history of Washington, like since I can remember, it's like every few games, like this guy has a career day against us. And it's been this way for as long as I can remember. It just seems to be a curse that if you play Washington, hey, you're gonna have a career day or chances are good. And it's like, man, or some NFL record is set or some crazy crap like that. And it's really annoying. Thought we would shake it at this point. But nope, not this time. Uh Penix look he looked comfortable, and that was a problem. It's one thing. It's okay if you get a couple lucky passes here or there, you just pull one out of your butt. But he just, you know, did his 3, 5, 7 step drop, had time, found an open guy, was reasonably accurate all day, and didn't seem much stressed much at all. Um, and I felt like we had gotten some decent pressure on him at points. but it didn't phase him. He just stood tall in the pocket and fired and completed most of them. So it was very disheartening, very upsetting, um, that a guy like Michael Penix could do that. Again, nothing against Penix. I like him. I think you like him as well. Just based on the struggles that were going on prior to this game, I was hoping that we could contain him a little bit more than what we did.
Yeah, I agree. And if you want to put up the stat of the week, I think that may be the next slide up there.
Hmm.
We can go ahead and jump into talking about that because that was the big thing that jumped out to me is the Michael Penix thing, right? Taking on our secondary. And I'm not going to question the guy's effort at all, but it didn't feel like the same energy or sharpness was there for this week that maybe we saw in some of the other weeks. And again, I'm not necessarily talking about beating ourselves the way we did against the Packers, but it just didn't feel like that same level of high level energy and sharpness was there the way I have seen it at some points this season. So, the first week against the Giants, we gave up what 170 yards passing, I think, to Russell Wilson. That looked good. We were pretty excited about that. 3 weeks in a row now, we've given up almost 300 yards to each guy. That's not 300 average. That's almost 300 to each guy. Jordan Love gets us for what, 290-ish, give or take a little bit. And Geno Smith, I get it. It was a loss. They're playing catch up, but still, we weren't able to slow them down yardage wise. He's picking up close to 300 yards, 290 somewhere in there. And then Michael Penix actually crosses over the 300-yard mark in passing. So that's 3 weeks in a row now. And so that's a problem for me. That bothers me a lot, right? Because if I liked the way our run defense is looking better, especially against the running backs, especially up the middle. But if we can't stop the passing game any better than this, and these aren't, Jordan Love is not one of the elite four. He's a good quarterback, but he's not one of the four. And then you have Geno Smith and Michael Penix who aren't anywhere near that. We're racking up what happens when we start playing the elites. So that's been a problem so far. And I'm sorry, it looks like we're
Yeah,
having
I
technical
was
difficulties.
I was muted. Sorry, my bad. Um, and we have another one of these elite quarterbacks coming up in Justin Herbert.
Yes,
Um, so yeah, it's going to be a problem. And we've said this before on the show where we don't live and die by PFF grades, but it does provide some context, even if it's not 100% accurate. It's a decent uh, gauge on how a player is playing most of the time, right? I can't believe that even if you're totally against PFF, that these grades are completely inaccurate. Okay.
right.
Um, so based on the numbers that you see, I'm not going to go through each individual one here. Um, but Lattimore ranked 95th out of 103. Amos 61st out of 103. Sanders still 87th. Noah I is not even ranked. And then you get to safeties out of 79. Quan Martin is 76th. Will Harris 34th. Revo is 66th. You have one starting caliber defensive back in your secondary, which is Trey Amos barely. I mean, I don't know. At least that's what the numbers are saying, like based on the way that they're playing. Um, the Lattimore trade at this point, I'm not, I'm still not ready to fully give up on it, but I am. I've said it before. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I think if you put Mike Sainristil on the outside and then you roll with Jonathan Jones once he gets back in the slot, or mix in Lattimore here or there on the outside and throw Sainristil inside occasionally, I'd be all right with that. But Lattimore just can't be out there. He's a massive liability. Um, I saw where in through 4 weeks, he's had 20 targets, has given up 11 receptions, 170 some yards, 2 touchdowns, committed 6 penalties. Like it's just not good, you know? And he's literally been the worst corner we've had this season. And Quan Martin is like 3 spots from the worst ranked safety in the NFL right now. And everyone was so optimistic about him this season. I thought he, like I said, I've said it a few times previously. I think he's at best. a third starting safety or like a third safety on a elite defense, right? Like you'd like to have him as your nickel guy or a guy that you bring in and passing situations to just cover up one of your guys, but I didn't think that he was a lead, deep safety. I just didn't think he was that kind of guy. And so far through 4 weeks, that has certainly been the case. And Reeves, I'm not gonna dog on him too much tonight because he's a backup special teams ace, but still not great performances and just disappointing because me and you talked about it. We thought this was a perceived strength going into the season because of the turnover in personnel and just being optimistic about that and the talent upgrade, just the sheer talent upgrade at the positions as well. But your thoughts on that?
So, listen, it's been a problem so far, the last 3 weeks, not the first week, but it's been a problem. What you just don't want to do is for it to continue, right? I feel like each of these players can play better. I really specifically feel like the unit can play better. The communication has not been good. The individual coverage has not been good. So, you really wish something would kick in here. And I don't even know if we need to play more man or less man or more zone. I don't want to quit playing the good run defense that we've pretty much shown for most of this season so far. So I'm not looking to just drop everybody out of, run stopping mode. But that secondary, those 5, 6, 7 guys that we're looking here, I really want them to step it up. And, maybe the coaching staff needs to be a help with that too. You mentioned maybe Lattimore getting a little bit less playing time. Sanders still kicking into his spot. Maybe we've got guys that can cover the slot a little bit better, with, Igbenogany and with, Jonathan Jones, who hasn't gotten a whole heck of a lot of playing time, right? Maybe we start mixing in those guys into the slot a little bit, kick Sanders still over to Lattimore's spot a little bit, let Lattimore sit just a little bit more. But those are things that the coaching staff can look into. Just don't want this to continue, right? Man, 300
No,
yards passing a week. That's, these aren't even the top offenses. They're fine offenses. The Packers offense is basically a top 8, top 10 offense, but these aren't the dominant offenses, right? This isn't the Bills and the Ravens and some of those other teams we're looking at, right? So, I would like to see us be able to correct this a little bit.
certainly, especially the next four is against LA, Chicago, the Chiefs, and then I forget who the other one is, but we're going to be lucky to come out. I think Dallas is in there somewhere. So we're going to be lucky to go 2-2 if things stay where they are. We're going to be lucky to go 500 over the next 4 weeks, which I would think would not be great given the status of where we are in the division and where the NFC is. We look up and we're 4-4 through 8 weeks, and there's not a lot of room for uh there's just not a lot of room to work with there. I cannot think. My brain is totally shot tonight. Sorry. Um, room for error. There we go. There's not a lot of room for error. If you're 4-4 through 8 weeks, like you might be able to lose two more games the rest of the way. So not saying it's not possible because we've rattled off several streaks dating back to last year, but I'd rather not put us in that position. So, um, any more thoughts before we move on?
Really, just more game notes in general. Obviously, the secondary we're not happy with right now. Haven't been happy
All right.
with it for 2 or 3 weeks now. Even the Packers game, lots of miscommunication. Since then, it's been, guys just not taking care of business, it feels like. So the secondary is the thing I don't like. Couple of things I did like though. Luke McCaffrey starting to continue to sprinkle in more productivity. It's not massive, but still, I like the idea that he's on the field and he's producing something, right? He's not sitting on the bench until garbage time, right? So that I like that. Javon Kinlaw to me is still bringing high energy, high force. Every time I see him out there on the field, he's moving that side of the line. So I like that. Debo Samuels has looked continued to look really good to me, that they're kind of no matter which quarterback's on the field, they're looking for Debo so far. So, I like that too. That that's those are some bright spots, and I get it. I'm sure one of the fans is yelling at us right now that if Jaden Daniels were out there and we were scoring more points, that the defense would have a little bit easier time. They could play a little bit different, which is all true. But even so, we were scoring points, right? We've scored points in the last 2 weeks, and the secondary has still not produced enough for us to go 2-0 during that time point. I do like that we're 1-1 with our backup quarterback, though. You know, that's still a good thing right there. That's something you can hang your hat on until whenever Jaden Daniels gets back in. So those are a few of the bright spots coming out of the week that, disappointing loss.
Yeah, Jaden should be back this week. Should be. Don't know if he will be or not, but he should be back this week. Terry, probably not. When we're talking about quad issues and the fact that, that could be a season-ending injury if it was a torn quad, and even bleed into the next year.
Yeah.
I'm honestly not one to want to mess around with that, so I'm fine. Obviously, I'm not fine, but like it to me for the long term, I'd be all right if he missed a couple more games to make sure that he's fully healthy. These soft tissue injuries, um, when it can get that severe, I think I'm fine with him missing like two more games, for the long term health there. I wanted to get your opinion on the offense because yes, backup quarterback good, 27 points on the road against this team should have been enough. However, do you think that we got away from the run game too much? Because that's been something that's been heavily criticized the past couple days.
I feel that way, yes. I mean, right now, from a statistical standpoint, and I wouldn't stack us up with, Derrick Henry or anyone like that, but from a statistical standpoint, we're running the ball among the best teams in the NFL right now, almost any way, you want to view it, right? And so why not lean on that, especially when your backup quarterback is in there, right? Why not chew
Hmm.
up some clock? Why not keep the ball on your side? Why not, produce some offense that way? And again, we did some of that, but I think I would like to see us do more of that. And I think I would like to see Krosky Merritt be getting more share of that, right? So, I don't see any reason not to lean into that. Until teams start to slow it down and then you start converting into the play action, right? And then you start building off of that. But I wouldn't, you know, it it doesn't help when you're down 10-0 from the get-go, right? You're already kind of getting pushed around that way, but still, you worked your way back into the game. And I like the running game so far. It has surprised me actually. I didn't think it would be this good. And maybe it won't continue to be this good, but as long as it is, let's keep leaning into that and building off of it. Because if the defenses are going to shut that down, they're usually going to have to bring an extra person into the box or they're going to have to drop somebody closer to the line of scrimmage, right? And then we have more to work with in space. So I would rather make those defenses stop our running game than for us to kind of shut it down, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of these drives started out with, okay, here's a 2 yard run, or here's a 5 yard false start penalty, or at one point there was a 1st and 30,
Yeah.
where it's like,
Ugh.
okay, we can't really run the ball here and get settled into our offense.
Yeah.
On first down, to open a drive, it was a reverse to Debo, which I think lost 4 yards. So again, I'm not saying that we have to run on first down every single drive or every single first down, but getting yards, putting yourself into second and manageable, third and manageable is a lot more important for your overall offensive success. I know this sounds incredibly simple. Maybe I'm making it too simple, but you're not going to be able to establish what you want to do on offense if you can't make progress on first down.
Mm-hmm.
This was kind of a sore spot last year where Jaden was constantly having to play hero ball.
Yeah.
And with Mariota, you can't really do that too much. And I mean, we've been running the ball fine without it, but I think that not trying to get too cute with a backup quarterback and with a solid run game, I feel like that would be smart for now until we can establish something else, you know. Um, but maybe that's probably why I'm not an offensive coordinator in the NFL. So,
I listen, I agree, and believe me, I get it. The Commanders are not going to make their long-term living on running the football until further notice, right? But and it would be different if we were, I don't want these guys to be handing the ball off and it be 3rd and 6 because we did 2 yards per carry on the first two downs, right? I'm not talking about that.
right.
But through 4 weeks, you've shown that you can run the football. That's a big deal, right? We've shown we can do this. So why not stick with it? Why not really make an investment on that until defenses stop it and then work off of that? This is not us trying to be conservative. This is us trying to go with something that has produced and has worked. And I realize that defenses can stop it, but let's make them make the effort. I really would like to see that.
I would much rather be frustrated because of a 1 yard or 2 yard gain on first down than a 4 yard loss on a reverse on first down. Not saying
Yes.
that Debo's not capable, but when it's not blocked up well and when the defense sniffs that out, like there's more risk involved with that than there is a 1 2 yard gain up the middle.
See, and that's another thing. You and I talked about during the offseason some of the moves that they made, and we more and more it came to the idea of looks like the Commanders either aren't going to use the running game all that much, or they're going to be relying on the jet sweep kind of end around type running game, which I think is what defenses are expecting out of them. And that's why you're seeing them being able to shut down some of these screens and sweeps. But also, the Commanders just aren't blocking them very well. We saw that back in the Packers week, where the wide receivers and the tight ends are not doing a good job out there blocking on these, rather simple plays that we're calling that should be small gainers, right? If nothing else, they should be 3 and 4 yard gains, not losses. That's a big deal. So, let's quit calling some of that since we're not blocking it very well. Let's call some of these runs up the middle since so far that's working pretty good.
Right. All right. You spent enough time on this. We gotta get moving here. So, week 5 preview. We started kind of last week a little bit, but tell us more this week about the LA Chargers. I keep wanting
Here's
to say San
Ben's.
Diego. Am I the only one?
No, no, no. I have done it. Yeah. And the Raiders still play in Oakland or Los Angeles. They do not play
Yep.
in Las Vegas. Yeah.
Yep.
So, here's Ben's scouting report. We'll keep it brief because we don't want to, get into this too much. The numbers you see on the left, that's where the Chargers actually rank so far through 4 weeks in 2025. Okay. So no more 2024 based numbers. This is all new data. Keep in mind, though, it's 4 weeks. These are small sample sizes. They may or may not reflect what the team can actually do. But here we go. On offense, the Chargers are 19th in points per game. And you notice they're 29th in red zone. So while they're getting a lot of yardage racked up here, they're not exactly killing it in the red zone. And they're not exactly scoring a ton of points either. So that's interesting to note about this Chargers offense. But you look at the yards per game, they're passing well. They're getting a lot of generic yards per game. Their EPA per play is good, and on third downs they're good, and that's mostly because they're getting a lot of yards. Okay, so the more yards you get, you're dealing with third and shorts, not third and longs. All good numbers for the Chargers, but they are struggling to actually cash in at times, and that's been a problem for them. On the defensive side, there's a lot of green over there on that defensive side. I don't really think that reflects their personnel all that much. I think it reflects their coaching staff, but I'll deal with that in just a second. But boy, you look at points per game allowed, they're fourth. Yards per game, fourth. Passing yards per game, fifth. Interesting note, rushing yards per game allowed, they're 16th, very middle of the pack. And we just talked about the Commanders being able to run the football a little bit, so keep that in mind. Defensive EPA, they're fifth. Red zone second. Sacks fourth. They don't generate a lot of turnovers. All right. So they, again, are more yardage based as a defense than they are turnover minded so far. Okay. So that's just keep that in mind. And then my grades on the right hand side of the screen here. You look at that defense. I'll just settle in on that for a second. To me, I look at all these defensive position groups on the roster. I'm just not overly thrilled with the talent base there. All right. I'm just not. They're very functional players. In some cases, could be a whole lot better as the season goes on. That's what those little upward dimple marks are for. I'm just not overwhelmed by the talent here on defense. It's good. It's not great. But that's my scouting report there on the Chargers.
I don't disagree with you. I feel like Quentin Johnston at receiver has had quite the at least early season revelation.
Yes.
Going from first round bust that can't catch a cold to now he's catching everything, and he's been a
Yep.
fantasy dream for me. So, for selfish reasons, I'm happy about that. Hopefully, not in this upcoming week, but Herbert as a B, I'm fine with that for now. I would probably put it at a B plus, A minus, but again, uh, I'm not the highest on Herbert, so I'm not going to argue too much on that one. And I'm sure you're a tough grader when it comes to quarterbacks, so not going to criticize you too much on that one. Omari and Hampton, I think that C plus eventually is going to at least become a B minus, if not a B plus. He had a monster game last week, so it's going to be time for us to strap down and um, really play our hearts out on run defense because and here's the thing I noticed last week, and well, again, we'll probably talk about this a little bit later as well, is we have struggled with outside zone or outside runs just in general when our offenses are testing the perimeter. And I'll be honest, I don't know what the Chargers run. Typically, maybe you can answer that. What type of running style are they between the tackles, between the guards, or they usually try to push the outsides, push the boundaries. If they do that more, if they go to the more outside zone, which is what the Falcons did consistently last week with Bijan, I think we're in for a long day. But if they're more up the middle, traditional quote unquote style of running, then we might be able to limit him a good bit.
It's a great point you bring up about American Hampton because he's not on my three keys for later, but boy, he's knocking on that door. He's one of about, I don't know, 8 to 10 rookies that have already flashed so far this year. They're starting to show what they might could do. And you make an especially good point about getting out there on the outside because when he's the most effective so far this year, and this was true in college too, it's when he can catch the corner. And boy, I don't think he's got top end track speed, but he is so quick and smooth at accelerating from first to second to third gear quick when he gets that edge. So you talk about us setting the edge being a big deal this week against Hampton. Let's just keep him in between the tackles. Let's make him work his way through there, and that'll be sufficient. But if he catches that edge, boy, he can go 30, 40 yards in a heartbeat. He is just so smooth at accelerating there. That could really devastate. So we got to make sure among all the other keys we're going to be talking about, whoever's responsible for setting the edge better darn well set it on these running plays because Hampton can catch that corner easy.
Excellent segue into our next segment here, which is what I'm calling the on the hot seat.
Mm.
We're gonna rebrand this next week to something a little bit different. But after a loss, I've been just taking it to this team and just being like, hey, look, we need to improve. We need to be better in many different ways, but specifically one way, and that's on the defensive side. Again, theme for this episode this
Mm.
week, secondary. I can't point
Yep.
anyone out because as I did mentioned earlier on the numbers you saw, it's everybody. It's not any one person that's the problem. This guy is. You ever see that meme where it's like, okay, we need to stay focused and stop pointing fingers? And you point right at Marshawn Lattimore like you're a problem. You're a real problem. That's what that's what this is. Where it is the whole unit, but it's specifically this guy. Look, they just got to play better. I don't know what else I
Yeah.
say about the secondary other than you got to play better, man. Because I really don't think it's a talent deficiency. I think we have talented guys.
Yeah.
You could argue that Reeves should not be starting, and I would agree with you.
Right.
But with what we have, this should be enough to at least be closer, much closer to a middle of the pack secondary than where we are now, which is bottom fourth at this point of the league.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that's that there. I put the pass rush here. I
Hmm.
would like to amend that and put just specifically the edge guys. I
Right.
think we signed Preston Smith, um, which who knows what he is at this point in his career. However, one thing, at least when he was in Washington, was that he prided himself in his run defense. Okay. And as I just mentioned a minute ago about these outside runs, someone needs to set the edge. Okay. I don't know how he is now at this point in his career. I just know when he was in Washington his first go around, that setting the edge was one of the things that he kind of prided himself on. Now, he wasn't always successful in doing so, but he was at least decent enough to where they couldn't necessarily run on him all the time. Okay. Um, Again, I might be having some revisionist history here, but that's what I remember. That's what I remember. So, activating Preston Smith and getting him out there. I'm not saying for 60 snaps, but just get him out there, early rundowns, get him into that rotation. I would be more than okay with that. And the pass rush as well. I mean, we are last in the league in time to throw for a quarterback. We just gotta get which shocked me. I
Mm.
actually thought that we were getting decent amount of pressure on quarterbacks this season, but probably between Atlanta and the Green Bay game, that's probably what's skewing us a little bit because we didn't get any pressure on Jordan Love at all
Right.
in Green Bay. Um, so that's probably skewing the numbers a bit, but we gotta get more pressure. We just have to. And finally, uh, look, I told you pre-production, I don't like blaming coaches, especially this early on in the season. But we're 24 games into the Joe Witt defense, like this era of the Joe Witt defense. And it's been the same thing week after week after week. Bad
Yeah.
run defense, secondary miscommunications, and just underplaying or being well below par. I cannot with this guy. I can't with this guy, man. He's not a bad coach, I don't think, but this is his first go around as a defensive coordinator. He's had something to prove, and he hasn't proved anything other than he might be a bad defensive coordinator. And as from Dan Quinn's perspective, you can't fire him because then you're going to take over play call duties. And what happens if the defense doesn't improve? Then you're a defensive coach. Then you look bad. And then if we don't, especially if we're not winning, then you're taking all the heat for that. So there's no out for you. And quite honestly, I think Quinn has a pretty good gig here. He probably don't want to mess that up if
Right.
we're just being point blank honest. So I don't know who else is on the staff that could call defensive plays, or maybe Quinn just needs to take over defensive play calling and leave Witt as the DC. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but this guy needs to change something up that he's doing, and it needs to change fast because personnel is not going to change that much. Even if you make trades and other signings, it's not going to change that much over the next several weeks. So this guy needs to get better, and the whole unit needs to get better. So your reaction to that diatribe?
Honestly, all of this is connected, right? I know a lot of people who are very devout on the idea that your secondary is only going to be as good as your pass rush. Now, I'm not quite on that strong of the end of the spectrum. I feel like a good secondary should be able to hold its own, even if the pass rush isn't consistently hot. But I will agree that if the pass rush can't do any better than last in the league, that the secondary is going to continue to struggle, especially this secondary based on what we've seen so far. Now, what can the coaching staff do about that, right? Because the personnel isn't going to change. You already mentioned that. So they've got to make some changes at some point this week or next week, whenever, right? Got to do something different. So does that start meaning you bring in blitzers? Does that start meaning you just really challenge these guys in the secondary to man up and line up on their guy and be responsible for their guy and make every pass difficult and tight? Or does it mean you completely switch it up and start dropping into more zones and just doing a lot more safety type zone stuff to really eliminate some of this, some of the explosives that we're getting here? So I don't have a strong opinion on that. I often do. In this case, I don't. It's all connected though, and something needs to change, right? We either need to find out a way to generate more pass rush to help out the secondary, or we need to help out the secondary by playing more soft zones and just making it easier on them. But the communication on the zones was lousy. So, somebody needs to step up here somehow. Um, we knew that the edge rush wasn't going to be big time, right? We knew that heading into the year, right? We thought, hey, maybe it's got something, hopefully not last in the league. We knew it wasn't going to be big time, and we were cautiously optimistic about the secondary. And right now, the optimism is gone. I'm not down on the secondary. I do think they have talent, but the optimism isn't there either. So it's all connected, and I hope Dan Quinn and Joe Witt can figure this thing out fairly soon because I don't want to keep giving up all this yardage in the passing game, man.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't either. The silver lining to this is that generally speaking, the run defense has improved. But again, the edges scare me. Like setting the edge against the run scares me. And they're just really, really athletic backs scare me. Like guys like Bijan Robinson, uh, guy that we're facing this week, Omarion Hampton, Saquon Barkley, we're gonna have twice. Javonte Williams looks like he's kind of turned his career around in short order in Dallas, and we got to face him twice. Uh, I can't think of other backs. We got yeah, DeAndre Swift. We got him in a couple weeks. Um, we've got a lot of good backs on the schedule left that have a pretty decent amount of athleticism and can
Yeah.
hit you in multiple different areas in multiple different ways. So we got to get this figured out rather fast, rather quickly. And I mean, this will be a good test, you know? If we can slow this offense down, then I feel reasonably encouraged. I'll feel reasonably encouraged by that. Um, and I hate to throw this out there too, but Jaden's got to get on track when he gets back. I didn't put him on the hot seat. I considered it though, because first 2 weeks he was playing, he didn't look great. Like there's not much time for you to
Yeah.
get right. You got to get right like now. I'm not saying it's emergency, but again, we're going to talk about the NFC here in the next couple weeks, whether it's this week or next week on Odds On Favorite on our other show, and on how competitive it's been. And we're probably not going to get the division crown. I mean, it's early yet, but we're probably not going to. So that means we got to grab a wild card spot, and there's a lot of competition in the NFC. And 10 wins might not get it. It didn't last year. So there's not a lot of room for error here. And Jaden needs to get right. He needs to get right fast when he gets back. So he's not on the hot seat yet, but I strongly considered it, you know?
No, I agree because again, I know somebody out there is yelling at us saying, "Hey, he's been hurt the past 2 weeks," and we get it.
Yeah,
But before that, before he got hurt, the first 2 weeks of the season, it didn't look good. It was very pedestrian, right? So we would love to see him have a healthy week, and then we would love to see him start having some hot weeks where he is really ripping it like we saw last year.
absolutely. All right. Ben, tell us what we got to do to win this game.
Oh, give me a second here. I got so wrapped up in that secondary, I set my notes to the side here. So, number one, I want to heat Herbert up the middle. Okay. We just talked about it. You mentioned it. And again, we didn't tie these notes together, but it does tie together. Our pass rush isn't great, and our secondary is giving up a lot of yardage. Now, I'm not overwhelmed by this group of receivers. I'm just not. They're a good group. They each offer something, and there's one guy in particular that I am concerned about. But I don't think it's an overwhelming group of receivers. But having said that, I do not want Herbert comfortably sitting back there picking us apart. You know, if I had my druthers, I'd rather Herbert beat us with his legs because even though he's good with his legs, he's still not Lamar Jackson and he's not Josh Allen. I don't want him sitting back there comfortably and just picking us apart all week, all day. I mean, so let's heat him up the middle. Let's really get some guys up the middle. Let's play two-man game. If Deron Payne can't create that by himself, and if Javon Kinlaw can't get that by himself, which they might, that Chargers offensive line is good in spots like the Joe Alt spot, right? Control Alt Delete, but it's not great up the middle. So we might be able to get them up the middle with Payne and with Kinlaw and anybody else want. But if we can't, let's start sending Luvu up the middle. Let's start doing some stunting, twisting. Please do not just let Herbert sit back there. I want to heat him up the middle. I really want to get in his face this game.
Yeah, I guess I've always come from like an aggressive mindset where I'll send 5 or 6 guys, and if we give up, a big chunk play here and there, like at least we tried it, like it was a risk, but
Right.
if it pays off great. I hate when, okay, we're gonna send three and sit 8 back and they're still gonna get that chunk play. That just drives me nuts. So I would rather be the more aggressive type where we're gonna send, five, six guys, you know, and try to get you that way instead of just dropping seven, eight guys back. It drives me nuts when the coordinators are that conservative like that, afraid of giving up a big play and then they give one up anyway. Um, what you got next?
Well, and quick note on that. See, I agree. If I'm going to give up yardage anyway, I'd rather do it being aggressive. Let's hope we get some big negative plays to go along with those chunk plays we're giving up. Maybe we get a turnover or a sack, right? Mixed in with the big chunk plays. Now, I'm not of the mindset, it depends on what you're getting, right? Belichick was a master back in his day of kind of playing smart, controlled defense and not giving up the chunk plays, even if the pass rush wasn't great, which they usually had a solid pass rush to go along. But, they didn't always have the great edge guys. There were years where they didn't have that, and he still put together good defenses. But I also didn't like the way the Detroit Lions did last year, where they were just decimated by injuries, and they were 1,000% aggressive, pedal to the metal every week, and they're giving up 30, 40 points some weeks. They did it to the Commanders. They did it a few weeks before that to the Bills. I don't want to do that either, but if I'm going to give up the chunk yardage anyway, like you said, I would rather do it being aggressive, especially in spots. So, number two, too high safety. I really want to limit again. I this group of receivers, I'm going to fix one guy here in a second. I'll address him. But as a group, I just don't want Quentin Johnston going off for touchdowns. Okay, so let's play too high. Let's keep Herbert from hitting that tight end up the seam. When I've dropped a guy down in, and I get it when I've got a blitz, I'm going to have to get away from too high, right? But that's not every play. So as many plays as we can, I want to keep too high and try to limit Herbert from busting me up downfield. Again, I'd rather flush Herbert out of the pocket and make him beat me with his legs on the run under duress than I would for him to sit back there. So, excuse me. I know that's not going to be easy, but we'll try to mix it up. So give me some too high safety. I don't want Quentin Johnston scoring a 60-yard touchdown. I'd rather force him into a possession receiver. Same thing for what is it, Keenan Allen, I think over there. Rather force him into possession. Disley, I don't want him scoring a 40-yard touchdown up the seam because we had one safety. Don't give them the explosives. I'd rather limit that.
Yeah, 100%. And when you're doing that, you just got to communicate because communication has been quite awful across the board. So
Not
I
good. Yes.
need to have communication.
All right. Number three. This is a tricky one. Okay. And I don't have the answer for it. I'm hoping maybe you got some answers for it. Okay. Here we go. The McConkey matchup. Okay. That's the one guy who does scare me. McConkey can consistently beat us and any defense if you allow him to. All right. Now, why is that so important? Last week, the Giants beat the Chargers. Okay. And Jackson Dart got all the attention for it, but Jackson Dart wasn't the reason. The defense was the reason. The defense set up Jackson Dart for not one, but two touchdowns basically from the 3 and 5 yard line, basically. They only scored 21 points last week. Right there's 14 of them. Now, Jackson Dart had his own nice, respective game. I respect him coming out there as a rookie with the high energy and the running and all of that. But it was the defense last week that caused the Chargers the problems. Now, the Giants have a fierce front four, which we don't have, that they could get pressure on Herbert. But they also put Phillips, their slot guy, on McConkey and really shut McConkey down for most of the day. We also don't have a guy like Phillips to plug into the slot role. So we need to figure out what to do with McConkey. We need to put somebody on him. And again, I was scrolling through. I was like, man, do you drop Jonathan Jones in there on him? Do you drop Igbenogany on him? What do you do there? I'm not sure, but we do need to figure out the McConkey matchup. That's something that was a key to the Giants' victory last week. It's something that will be key to us if we're going to win. Again, it's not the only thing, but that is something they consistently rely on is yardage to McConkey. It results in their touchdowns very often, and when they don't get it, they struggle in the red zone.
So the unfortunate part is Jonathan Jones is injured, so you can't put him out there. Igbenogany, I have mixed feelings about him. He's average at best. Um, what I would do personally is I would put a guy, I'd pretty much like stack him. Okay, so I get a physical guy out there, whether that's Sanders still, whether that's a guy like Tyler Owens who hasn't had a lot of playing time because he's more of a special teams guy and he hasn't had a lot of defensive snaps. Um, but the reason for that would be he's a big body and he can jam a smaller guy like McConkey on the line, hopefully without committing any, any penalties or anything like that nature. Again, might be a liability at this point in his career on the defensive side, but throwing him out there to just jam off line, then maybe send him on a delayed blitz wouldn't be a bad idea for a couple snaps. And then I would put primarily, just because he's been the best guy, and I seem to have a lot more faith in this guy than maybe I should, is Trey Amos. I'd put him on him. I'd have him travel with him, even though he is probably going to line up primarily in the slot. I would put Sanders still on Johnson or on Johnston, and then put, Lattimore on Allen when he's out there because again, you're playing matchups and not sides, which this defense likes to do for some reason. Um, and I would play it that way because Sanders still why there's a clear size disadvantage there with Johnston. Um, he has the speed and athleticism to keep up with him. I think he's has enough, strength and toughness to try to jam him up on the line. If you're playing press man. Uh, Lattimore against Allen, I'm not too concerned about. Allen's probably going to beat him, but I would feel more confident in Lattimore playing against Allen than I would Johnson or McConkey. So you put Amos on McConkey, have him travel, Sanders still primarily on Johnston. And then, like I said, if you could stack him every once in a while with a guy like if Percy Butler's back in the lineup, have him try to jam him, and then have Amos follow him. Guy like Tyler Owens, who's a bigger body, try to jam him. Just like throw bodies at him continuously. Throw someone else at him. Try to jam him up on the line. Throw him off his route. Throw off the timing between him and Herbert. That would be my strategy against it. But again, that's probably why I'm not a defensive coordinator in the league. So
I don't think we have a lot of great answers, to be honest, for the McConkey
no,
matchup
no,
because
we
we
don't.
don't have the front four that the Giants have, and we don't have an I an upper part of the league slot guy like Phillips, like the Giants have. So I don't think we have a lot of great options, but I do like what you're putting out there. I wouldn't put Lattimore on McConkey, like you said. I would not do that. So that leaves us with, well, do we move over Sanders still, which I like that, or do we move over Amos, the rookie, which I'm a little scared to trust the rookie, but so far he's kind of outplaying some of these other guys on the secondary, right? We talked about that earlier. And I'm with you, man. I This play inside stuff, boy, doesn't that just hand most of the power over to the offense to pick the matchup they like best? I
Yeah,
realize they get some of that anyway, but doesn't that just give them any more of that power? And isn't, listen, if this defense is playing lights out, I'd say heck yeah, let's keep the sides going. It's not. The secondary is struggling. So why don't we take the power back from the offense to pick the matchup they like and let's us start dictating the matchup that they like, right? Let's force them to throw to Keenan Allen. Okay.
yeah,
With Lattimore fighting for his job, right? Let's
yeah,
force that a little bit. So I'm with you.
yeah. And I would say as well that um, uh, Mc- the the problem with McConkey is he's a lot like I'm not saying he is Cooper Cup, but he reminds you that he's gonna be a mismatch with you on a one-on-one more times than not. And if you try to
Yeah.
play zone, he's gonna find the soft spot, and he's gonna be like a technician in that regard.
Hmm.
And there's not much there's not many players out there that are gonna be able to keep him limited or stop him without bracketing him completely or double covering him.
Yeah.
So it's tough to guard a guy like this without sacrificing somewhere else. And when you're trying to stop a guy like Omari and Hampton, when you're trying to keep a guy like Herbert in the pocket, when you're trying to guard deep against Johnston, you're sacrificing somewhere. So you're either going to let
Right.
McConkey nickel and dime you, and death by a thousand cuts in the term or in terms of like 7 to 15 yard receptions and just have them march down the field, or you're going to give up a 50 to 60 yard, touchdown to Johnston. I it's a hard offense to defend.
It's especially going to get hard if Hampton continues to take, those next steps where he's running up the middle and around the edge, because then you kind of have the trifecta, right? You've got the quarterback, the receiver in McConkey, and the running back in Hampton. So that would be almost impossible for this defense to stop. But in theory, let's hope that Hampton is still limited action, not yet fully exploding up the middle, right? He's still kind of relying on those edge runs, and we're able to contain that. In theory, let's suppose we're making life really hard on McConkey. And in theory, let's suppose that maybe we're not letting Herbert just sit back there the whole game and pick us apart. In theory, we might could slow him down a little bit.
In theory, sure. So I guess now is as good a time as any to give our final predictions.
Okay. I hate to pick the Commanders to lose again, but that's what I'm going to do here.
Yep.
I I do feel like the Commanders can score. Okay. This is a solid defense, but the Commanders they've shown the ability to move the football, especially with Jaden Daniels in there. So I feel like the Commanders can score probably 24, 27 points here. But I'm not sure, based on everything we've talked about, they're going to be able to slow down this Chargers offense. And again, I don't think it's a dominant Chargers offense yet. It might be by the end of the season, but they're still kind of finding their way. But, give me 31 points here for the Chargers. So Chargers win. I'm going to go ahead and say 31 to 27, but that's about what I've got this week.
You're optimistic, sir. Look, I said last week that like the Chargers are going to be a really tough matchup, and I would view them, despite the loss against the Giants, I would view them as a contender in the AFC,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
which is new for me. I'm not letting up on that, and Jaden's first game back. Offensive line still, I think, has question marks. Sam Cosmi might be back. I don't think he's going to be back though because he hasn't practiced yet, but they're looking maybe activating him. Um, Again, not a super supremely talented defense with LA, but still a very effective defense.
Right, right.
So and we can't stop this offense, man. I'm just telling you right now, Hampton's going to have over 100 yards,
Oh no.
probably over 150
Oh no.
for total yards. Johnston's going to have a touchdown or two. McConkey is going to have like 12 receptions.
Mm.
It's going to be a long day, man.
We didn't stop
I'm
anything.
We
Darn
didn't
it.
stop anything. I hope I'm wrong. I'm saying 38-25.
Mm.
Um, it's just not great because Terry's still going to be out. That's another thing too. Terry's still
Yeah.
going to be out. You got Jaden coming back off a knee injury, which we still don't know what the knee injury is. It's just a knee injury. That's what we're being told. With an offensive line that's still adjusting to each other and gelling and so forth. Brendan Coleman was out again last week. Uh, don't know if you were aware of that or not. Um, so I don't see much hope this week, man. And hopefully that's enough to kick us into gear for the rest of the year. But yeah, I got 38-25 LA.
I tell you another thing that's kind of got me down on this game as far as us having a chance to win, which we do. We've got a chance to win,
Oh,
but
sure, yeah.
it's not looking great so far. So far in the two road games, that this is what I was getting at. We've looked disoriented. Okay,
Yes.
so we haven't looked. Yeah, the energy I thought was fine against the Packers, and I thought the effort was fine against the Falcons last week, but it just looks disoriented on the road, and I'm not sure what's creating that or why. These guys have all played on the road before in hostile environments and non-hostile, so I would love to, even if we end up losing the game, I would love for us to just look a little bit more like we're mentally into it, like we're sharp, we know what we're doing, we know where we're supposed to be. Our communication is good, we're in the right spots, we're not beating ourselves. Let's at least put together that kind of a game and give ourselves a chance here and not look quite so disoriented like it's our first time playing on the road. So, we'll see. Tough game here for the with the Chargers. Even if we lose this game, which you and I both have projected us to do just exactly that, that puts us at 2-3. And the rest of the schedule, while it has its hard points, it also has its easy points. So it'll be manageable, and we'll still be right in the mix of this NFC wild card thing, but it will put us behind the eight ball a little bit. So it'll just be time to start picking it back up if we cannot win this game. It's not the end of the world, but boy, it would be nice to pull a victory out of here and be 3-2 instead of 2-3.
Couldn't agree with you more. And but we will see how it goes. LA typically isn't a hostile road environment. Excuse me, but it's still on the road, and like you said, I agree with you. We seemed just off in two road games, and it's early. It's evident early. That's the problem.
Right.
We're not
Yes.
getting off to fast starts
Early.
on the road,
Yeah.
and that's something you need to do on the road. Is you need to punch these guys in the mouth like
Uh-huh.
from the get-go, and just hasn't happened yet. And hopefully in LA, that's a little bit different a story.
Yeah, if we could start off, and listen, I know Herbert can win coming from behind, but so can our guy. Let's give
Yep.
ourselves a chance to play with the lead here. So I know that's easy to say and hard to do, man. But I would love to see it. I would love to see it just come out more crisp and solid here.
All right. You would like to tell our audience about what's going on box score?
Over at the Box Score Network, which we are a part of, we're connected to. It's a lot of NFL stuff, man. We got the Tricky Takes group. They do a lot of NFL. Simon and Friends is almost all NFL right now. Two Peas on a Pod is mostly NFL. Odds on favorite when we're doing a special show is NFL. When we're not, it's this Commander stuff. And then we have the soccer thing with calls CONCACAF. So go check them all out. They're producing just about every week, most of them. In some cases, they're producing twice a week. So go check them all out. That's the Box Score Network, Apple and Spotify.
Also on YouTube at the Box Score Network. Make sure you check the stuff out there. Several different clips and stuff that are being posted there. We'll start posting some YouTube shorts here and there. So make sure you subscribe to that channel. Also forgot to mention, sorry, excuse me, subscribe to this channel here, Pro Football Enterprise. Set notifications, leave us a comment. Uh, your thoughts on the game, thoughts on how we can improve. Not just the Commanders, but us too. How we can improve. We'd like to hear that as well. So we'd really appreciate the subscription and the feedback if possible. Anything else, Ben?
And I've enjoyed doing it. It's always a privilege to talk football. It's a lot more fun to talk about the wins, but it's still always a privilege to talk football. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you all. We'll see you all next week, hopefully after a win.